Martin Luther, his life and his work, created quite a ruckus in Europe. Up until the time of the Protestant Reformation, the Western Church had been largely uniform for the preceding 1500 years. And the Reformation, however, split this unified church into two distinct camps, the Roman Catholic and the Lutheran. In the decades and centuries to follow, a multiplicity of additional denominations would emerge on the scene. But by the year 1600, the Lutheran Church had been largely established and solidified in the countries of Germany and the Scandinavian countries of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, as well as in pockets elsewhere in Europe. Over the centuries that would follow, the Lutheran Church would spread along with many other denominations as European settlers reached new lands around the world, bringing their faith and sharing it with them. Until today, the Lutheran Church worldwide is constitutive of approximately 80 million Christians and is one of the major branches of Protestant Christianity in general. To this day, it still remains most concentrated in the countries in which it began, in Germany and in Scandinavia, but also has large populations in the United States, as well as countries as far-flung as India, Indonesia, and in some African countries, such as Ethiopia and Tanzania. This lesson focuses on the aftermath of Martin Luther and the Reformation, and how the Lutheran Church has continued to grow into the church it is today, and what defines Lutheranism and how it's differentiated from other Christian denominations. So welcome with us as we explore this thing that came out of the Protestant Reformation, Lutheranism, and the Lutheran Church. How settlers, traders, explorers took with them their beliefs and their religious practices during what is known as the Age of Discovery, where improvements in navigation and transportation allowed particularly Europeans to travel around the globe and develop settlements and colonies everywhere, bringing with them their religious beliefs. This was true too of Lutherans, and they, as they traveled the world, brought with and established their Lutheran faith into Lutheran communities and congregations in many parts of the globe. This occurred as well in America. The first Lutheran settlers arrived in the 16th century, creating small pockets of congregations here and there along the eastern seaboard. But it wasn't until the 19th century when Lutherans began coming to the United States en masse. During this time, many of the immigrants from Europe came from Lutheran countries of Germany and Scandinavia, and they came bypassing the already settled areas on the East Coast, settling primarily more inland in the Midwestern United States. While Lutheranism is found in every part of the country and in every state today, nonetheless, the greatest concentration is still found in the upper Midwestern states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, the Dakotas, and so forth, largely because of this historic process of immigrants from Lutheran countries settling first there in those regions. However, at present, there are just over 10 million Lutherans in the United States today, practicing under a couple large denominations mostly. Those are the ELCA, or Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And our two congregations bridge both of those, reflecting both traditions here in the United States. And while there are a multiplicity also of Lutheran denominations, they are united in their common belief, their common approach to theology, and many of their worship and cultural practices as well. So we've used the word Lutheran and Lutheranism a lot in the last couple lessons. But what exactly does Lutheran mean? Well, when you hear the word Lutheran, you should at the same time hear the word Christian. Lutherans are first and foremost Christians, followers of Christ and lovers of God. And Lutheranism is but a subset, a type, a form, a tradition within the wider Christian church. We share in common the core beliefs of almost all Christians, confessing the Apostles' Creed, which summarizes our faith. Our study of theology to this point, along the lines of the Apostles' Creed, is almost in complete uniformity with Christians of all denominations. Our means of prayer, especially in the Lord's Prayer, is common to all Christians. And our ways of acting in the world, of serving our neighbor, and our ethics, according to God's teachings in the Ten Commandments and elsewhere in the Bible, are likewise held in common across Christianity. So we must first and foremost recognize that Lutherans are Christians, and that while we live in a culture today with many denominations, we can confidently worship with, pray with, and serve alongside our Christian brothers and sisters from many denominations. However, what distinguishes Lutheranism among these many denominations? Well, Lutheranism does have a unique emphasis and tone that separates it mostly in style and in approach from other Christian denominations. Its core belief on justification by God's grace through faith and its systematic working out of that core belief is peculiar to Lutheranism. Its emphasis on God's doing for our salvation, for our being claimed as His children, for His work through the means of grace of the sacraments and of His Word. These emphases, along with a tone of joy, of peace, and of love, are hallmarks of the Lutheran tradition, and which perhaps distinguish it among other denominations today. Above all, Lutheranism is a theological commitment. While Lutheranism, as its particular brand of Christianity, can be found in all cultures, in all parts of the world, spoken through all different types of languages, what unites us all is our theological beliefs. A number of these important beliefs are the importance of grace, that God's disposition towards us is wholly good and graciously given, that it is not earned by anything that we do or by who we are or who our neighbor is, but rather God's relationship to us is determined by God's goodness and God's love, and we simply receive and trust in that. There is a definite commitment to the importance of faith, that before we respond to God's goodness with the works of our hands, we have to first accept this, who God is and what He has done through Christ. We must accept this by faith and hold on to it with great strength and with fullness of heart. And that in first receiving this good news and believing it and living with God by faith, then follow all the good things that we should do as Christians, and we do them joyfully and freely. There's also a great emphasis in Lutheranism on the Scriptures, of coming back repeatedly in our pursuit of understanding of God and how we should live in relationship to Him, of coming back to that which has been revealed through the Bible. We give less emphasis to human, I don't want to say interpretations, but human constructions apart from the Bible, practices that are not insisted upon in the Bible. Lutheranism, in its mode of thinking, comes back again and again to what the Bible says, and all of our teachings as a church are checked against what is contained there in the Scriptures. Also important in Lutheranism is the emphasis on love, that all the ethics of the Bible and our way of life living in the gospel is characterized preeminently by love, that it is the end of God's law, it is the purpose of our lives, and it is how we understand God approaching us and how we respond and turn to God. That love is a continual dynamic in our theological understanding. These theological commitments are really the hallmarks of the Lutheran faith, and you'll find the words grace, faith, scripture, love repeated over and over again, along with the centrality of Christ. And these themes, as it were, really form the lens in which we understand our faith life, in which we practice church, and in which we share commonality with other Lutherans today. One other unique thing about Lutheranism that perhaps sets it apart from other Christian denominations is generally its style of worship. Many people position Lutheranism sort of midway between Catholicism and Protestantism, because while it has a Protestant theology, it has a very Catholic sensibility when it comes to worship. Worship in Lutheran churches generally is rather formal. There is a distinct order of service that includes responses from the congregation. There is a calendar that is followed that guides us through the church year. There are somewhat elaborate vestments or clothing worn by the clergy and other lay leaders, and different decorations that is more traditional and formal in its aspect. The music, too, in many Lutheran churches is an older type of hymns for the most part, more traditional music, and again, more formal in style and in feel. And for this reason, Lutheranism can be a little foreign to visitors, and it can be a little difficult to access. But this tradition, which has been handed on to us, is one that continues to be carried on, and many longtime worshipers find this mode of worship and of glorifying God to being somewhat comforting in its rhythm and repetition. So this style of worship is something that uniquely characterizes Lutheran churches in general. Another couple features characteristic of Lutheranism are its emphasis on education and its emphasis on service. From the beginning of Lutheranism and Protestantism, a heavy emphasis on learning, that one may know the Bible for themselves, has been prominent among Lutheran culture. There has been an emphasis on educating the young as well as on educating adults that they may know and understand the faith for themselves. In this vein, Lutheranism has been prominent in establishing schools, colleges, universities, and summer camps and programs, as well as this very thorough confirmation instruction. This is all part of the wider Lutheran emphasis on a knowing of one's faith. Now, this is sometimes perhaps to its detriment, as Lutheranism can be a little bit intellectual and heady, and not connecting as much with the heart and the lived lives of people today. But nonetheless, education remains a very important person, most especially revealed in the wide network of schools, seminaries, and colleges sponsored by Lutheran bodies. Also important is an emphasis on service. The Lutheran Church from the beginning has also had a very active role in serving its neighbors in love, just as Christ served us. This is seen in many of the Lutheran hospitals, orphanages, nursing homes, and facilities for disabled folks. The Lutheran Services in America, which is a conglomerate of many independent Lutheran hospitals and so forth, is actually the largest charity in America. And it unites many different outreach efforts, but inspired by the same drive to serve those in need out of love. And a critical component of any Lutheran worshiping body is not only education, but also service, finding a way to meet the needs of those folks around us who need our help and who benefit from the gifts that we have to share. So again, education and service are core expressions of the Lutheran tradition. And finally, Lutherans are somewhat distinguished among other Christians by their culture. Lutheranism, again, is a type of Christianity, and it is a theological commitment that is expressed around the world in different places and through different languages in a wide variety of ways. Nonetheless, the Lutheranism that we are most familiar with in America is characterized by its unique German and Scandinavian ancestry, reflecting its history of the peoples from which it comes. We see this expressed in, say, our recent Oktoberfest celebration, which is rather German in its food and its music and its decoration, and also in our recent Reformation party, which was somewhat Scandinavian in its potluck meal. And these cultural factors also come to the fore in many Lutheran congregations in America today, and are generally characterized by a relatively quiet, stoic, but still warm personality that permeates much of its interaction and demeanor. This cultural aspect truly is not important. It's not theologically relevant to our belief in God. Nonetheless, this is still a common aspect of Lutheranism and plays into its popular conception as very, very German or very Nordic people today. In this lesson, we studied some of the basics of the history of the Lutheran Church and how it spread around the world and to America. We also explored some of the defining characteristics of the Lutheran tradition in relationship to the wider Christian Church. In our next lesson, we're going to be looking at some of these other main Christian denominations around the world, and will help to better position our Lutheran tradition relative to these other expressions of the universal Christian faith. So join with us next week as we take a journey away from our current tradition, learning about other Christians across our country and around the world. God bless you all this week.